Did streetwear become streetwear at a trade show in San Diego? If you talk to people that were there, 432F keeps coming up as one of those moments. Bobby Ruiz from Tribal has called it a place where he believes streetwear was born. Scott Nelson, who went on to create Mankind, remembers seeing the show and realizing he could build a brand of his own. And in September 1993, the Los Angeles Times went to San Diego and described 432F as the first streetwear industry show, with roughly 40 clothing companies packed into an old office building downtown. So did streetwear begin there? The evidence tells us it couldn't have. Stussy was already established. Fresh Jive, Tribal, 555 Soul, Cross Colors, and Fucked were already operating. Dapper Dan had been doing his thing, remixing luxury language in Harlem for over a decade. And skate companies had already shown that a subculture could build its own products, media, and distribution. By the time 432F happened, the ingredients were already moving. Maybe 432F wasn't the birthplace, because we know this was an evolution, just like hip hop. But maybe it was a place where those pieces finally saw themselves as something bigger. Before streetwear became an industry, it was a mosaic of rebellious cultures, sharing attitudes, music, ideas, and space. Surf, skate, hip-hop, graffiti, punk, hardcore DJs, and club kids. Chicano and lowrider culture, tattoo culture, artists and graphic designers. It was a mishmash. They didn't all dress the same, come from the same neighborhoods, or even call what they were doing the same thing. And actually, let me speak on that, because most of the time, we're not the ones that name it. We're just the ones doing it, creating it. It's usually media or somebody from the outside that ends up giving us a title and a label. By the early 90s, those worlds were increasingly colliding through clothing and art and music. We're going to stick to streetwear right now. So that's why 432F matters. It didn't invent the pieces. It put them in the same room. That's what's important. And the brands that came out of different scenes could all meet each other, meet retailers, meet international buyers, and recognize they were not isolated experiments anymore. And this even goes back to hip hop, right? Like, we were doing our thing all over the country, but the music conventions is where we built and solidified the relationships, and everything kind of coalesced and we galvanized there. That's why it all came together as we met and saw and heard, wow, yo, you're just like me. You're doing this, but you're doing it a little bit different because you come from. And then we all started kind of collaborating. And that's why these parallels of hip hop, culture, and streetwear are so aligned. And that's also why I think galvanized is a much better word than birth. Because again, it's an evolution that came together because the culture was already happening. But 432F helped make the culture visible to itself. Brands came before the category. To understand why that room mattered, why 432F matters, you got to zoom out. And see, streetwear wasn't created as a category and then filled with brands, but that's what it feels like today. See, the brands came first. The category had to catch up. Somebody had to name it, give it a box, because there is no single clean first streetwear brand, because the people we now place under that umbrella all came from different operating systems. Sean Stussy began by putting his signature hand style on surf graphics and boards in the early 80s, then built Stussy into something that moved far beyond surf. In Harlem, Dapper Dan opened his boutique in 82 and used luxury logos, sportswear silhouettes, and hip-hop culture, of course, the D-Boys, as aspiration to create a visual language the luxury houses themselves were not making for us. And by the end of that decade, the field gets crowded. Fresh Jive and Tribal begin in 89. Cross Colors, 555 Soul are part of that same 80s turn. Fucked emerges around 90. Extra Large opens in Los Angeles around 1991. Got dates, correct them, help us out. And these brands are not all doing the same thing. Some come from surf, some come from skate, some through hip hop, or if you want to call it back then, urban. There's a lot of graffiti. There's a lot of club scene, downtown art, all of these things coming together, sampling things that will inspire us and adding them in to create something new. And that's the important part. Before streetwear became a stable industry label, these companies were already translating their communities into product. And peep this, in 1992, the Los Angeles Times was already using the word streetwear to describe a mix of oversized hip-hop style, skating, surfing, and Southern California's underground club scene. So by the time 432F opens in 1993, the name and the movement are already in circulation. So streetwear was literally a category problem before it became a category. And that problem is, again, usually from people outside of our realm. But you also have to remember, we're taking these rebellious, anti-establishment, and then trying to fit them into this industry. So we're just learning how to actually take these things and make them into an actual business. And interestingly enough, that's where the surf industry teaches us infrastructure. See, one part of streetwear history that gets overlooked, because it's not sexy, it's not romantic like graffiti or hip hop, it's that surf culture, action sports really, gave streetwear part of its business infrastructure. See, surf companies already understood how to turn a lifestyle into product. They had the graphic tees, shirts, logos, specialty retailers, sales reps, wholesale accounts, sponsored athletes, magazines, and regional scenes. And they had a trade show system where a small company could show a collection to buyers and leave with orders. That system was ASR, Action Sports Retailer. Michael Pringle understood the value of that machinery. He brought his brand Stupid into ASR and wrote some pretty serious orders. Used that momentum to build behind the post office in San Diego. It's an early retail home for labels like Fucked, Pervert, Fresh Jive, Tribal, Con Art, and 555 Soul. These emerging brands didn't have to invent the apparel business from zero. They had to start from zero on their own to kind of get to a point where they needed the business. But surf had built that highway. Streetwear started driving something very different down it though. The old room did not fit the new culture. And ASR is exactly where the tension becomes visible. By the early 1990s, surf fashion was changing. The neon boom of the late 80s cooled down. Baggy silhouettes, darker colors, rap and hip hop, skating, and club culture were becoming much more influential. So at the January 1993 ASR show, reports described the floor that was effectively splitting into different camps. You had your traditional surf companies, younger street-oriented section, and companies trying to live like kind of in that middle space. Bobby Ruiz remembers Tribal arriving at ASR and the organizers not quite knowing where to place them. And that makes a lot of sense knowing our history and how he describes Tribal with graffitis, tattoos, skateboarding, lowriders, rock, and hip hop. They skated, but they were not just a skate brand. They were connected to hip hop culture, but they were not simply like an urban fashion rap company. The existing categories were too narrow for what was happening. We didn't fit into surf, skate, or menswear. So some of the streetwear companies described themselves as being pushed out, feeling like disinvited from ASR. Surf industry reps, of course, disputed parts of the story and argued the show needed to stay connected to its beach roots. We can get that. Like, we feel that same way sometimes, you know what I'm saying, when other people come in. I get that, but that's not what I'm interested in. I'm not trying to turn this into a disagreement about heroes and villains and what happened. It's more about what it tells us. See, a new culture had become commercially significant enough that the old institution could no longer comfortably contain it. And when an institution no longer fits an emerging community, people build another institution. Keep that in mind for the future. And that institution then is 432F. In September 1993, roughly 40 companies gathered in an aging 7-story office building on F Street in San Diego's Gaslamp Quarter. They doubled up in offices, did business in the hallways, and created a show that looked more like the culture it represented than a polished convention center floor, which created a much better dynamic for us and I'm sure made them feel much more invited, right? So they say Michael Pringle is one of 4 clothing people who produced the show. And later, history loves to flatten the story and make it just Pringle alone, but it was four people. I still want to know who all four were. That gap is a good reminder that scenes get simplified once the history becomes mythology. Surf had that industry kind of locked, that format, but skateboarding gave streetwear something just as important. It gave it a blueprint for taking culture to market without waiting for mainstream fashion to approve it. By the 1980s, skate companies had already built a complete ecosystem. You had a brand, you had a team, individual riders with their own identities, signature products, graphic artists, stickers. Most importantly, they had skate shops. They had magazines and advertising, tours, and of course, the infamous skate videos. Pal Peralta and Bones Brigade are one of the clearest examples. The company wasn't just selling decks. The writers, the graphics, and videos gave kids characters, stories, and a world they felt they could belong to. Vision Streetwear, the first company using streetwear, pushed skate identity into apparel on the lifestyle side. So you didn't just have to be a skater to rock their clothes. And the lesson was powerful. You don't need a department store or a fashion magazine to define whether you matter. Build the team, make the product, create your own media, put it in the right shops that are yours. That's one of the things the skate companies did. It was the skate shops that gave us that blueprint. And the main thing was let the community carry it. Those skate shops became third spaces, and streetwear inherited a lot of that DNA. Family tree. What streetwear sample? Now we can answer the bigger question. What exactly was streetwear combining? Personally, you know what I'm saying? For my life and just obviously doing a little bit of research what I'm doing now, we can't say streetwear has one parent. Just like hip hop, it has a family tree. It's an evolution. Surf gave it part of its commercial chassis, lifestyle branding, specialty retail, reps, wholesale, and the trade show system. Skate gave it DIY, teams or crews, independent media, and the confidence to build outside of mainstream fashion and, of course, independent retail. Hip hop gave it sound, authenticity, sneakers, sportwear, aspiration, and of course, philosophy of sampling and remixing. Graffiti gave it some visual language built around identity, hand style, repetition, and visibility. Punk and hardcore reinforced anti-establishment thinking, provocation, and of course, more DIY. And that's basically the foundation of a lot of this. And of course, there are those spaces where those influences could actually cross-pollinate. The clubs, you know what I'm saying? Contemporary reporting, like in 1992, specifically in Southern California's underground nightclub scene, like it was a huge part of this new streetwear mixture. Those spaces let skaters meet DJs, designers meet graffiti writers, musicians meet visual artists, and everybody sees what everybody else is doing and wearing. You see Chicano, lowrider tattoo culture also alongside this origin story, especially on the West Coast. Tribal alone makes a simplified surf plus skate plus hip hop equation possible. Typography, tattoo iconography, lowrider aesthetics, and workwear were already part of their vocabulary. And underneath all of it were clothes that were never invented as streetwear in the first place. You had Dickies and Ben Davis and Carhartt and vintage military surplus and, all the baseball caps and starter and varsity jackets and obviously sneakers were there. We just made the culture ours. Communities wore existing uniforms, changed the context and gave them new meaning. So streetwear didn't really emerge from fashion asking anything like, what should young people wear? It emerged from the communities, us, using clothing to communicate who they already were. I believe the reason, to me, at least, streetwear feels so connected to hip hop is deeper than, rappers wearing the clothing or hand styles and graffiti or the elements being involved. It's a shared creative method. Both are built through sampling. Hip hop didn't invent the drum break. We just isolated that break on each record and rearranged it, sampled it, and made it something new and changed the meaning, changed the identity of that original form and made it our own. Streetwear does something very similar with visual and fashion culture. Take a work pant built for labor, a varsity jacket from sports, a military jacket, a corporate logo, graffiti lettering, a surf graphic, a tattoo image, a luxury monogram, luxury materials, and move all of those things into another context, mash them together, take pieces from there, and create something completely different. You know, Dapper Dan flips that luxury language for Harlem. Fresh Jive riffs on advertising and corporate graphics. Fucked turns familiar corporate visual codes into provocation. Graffiti writers turn typography and repetition into identity. Tribal and people like Conart, I used to love those brands back in the days because they touched on graffiti. It felt hip hop. It felt, rebellious, the creative process, selection, juxtaposition, transformation. The originality isn't always in inventing every ingredient. Sometimes the originality is hearing or seeing relationships nobody else heard yet. Again, there's nothing new under the sun. It's just new people, new players, new spaces, new places. And hip hop sampled music and vernacular. Streetwear sampled culture. Now, let's take it back to San Diego for a second. If the brands, the influence, and even the word streetwear were already there before 432F, why does this little trade show loom so large in the people's memories, especially those that were there? It's because culture doesn't only accelerate through ideas, it accelerates through proximity. It accelerates through collaboration. And 432F created a room where a person running a small brand in San Diego could meet somebody else running their brand from New York. They can meet retailers. They can meet manufacturers, and a company selling locally can meet a buyer from Japan. So this is how it starts to spread out. We go from just the creativity, just the ideas, just, trying and putting things together to now it's folding into business and understanding and learning how to create scale from these ideas. And somebody who had only imagined starting a brand could walk the halls and discover that other people had already made the leap. So now I'm inspired. Now I got connections and I can talk to other people. This is that collaborative time that I'm talking about because we were learning, and when we're learning, we ask each other. Now everybody knows everything. You know what I'm saying? And, you have kids that read the internet and they're all arrogant because they think because they read information, they know what's going on. So Scott Nelson's story is one of the clearest examples. He came out of skating, punk, hardcore, reggae, and hip hop. He worked around Don at Pervert in Miami and then saw 432F. The show helped make the possibility of his own company feel real. He went back, developed Mankind, and returned as a participant. And I know there's so many of these other stories. And if you got one, hit me in the comments and let me know because I would love to hear. And that's what a healthy ecosystem does. It reproduces and shares knowledge and information. Bobby Ruiz remembers the show helping Tribal make international connections. And that matters because Japan will become a huge force in curating, recognizing, and evolving American streetwear. Remember, Stussy, same thing, right? He has Stu York, but they also had the London chapter, the Paris chapter, as well as a Tokyo chapter. And who was in that? Hiroshi Fujiwara, #1, right? The godfather of streetwear in Japan. So by the mid-90s, names associated with the 432 ecosystem included Tribal, Fresh Jive, Conart, Pervert, Fucked, Mankind, Echo, 555 Soul, Shepherd Ferry, Not From Concentrate by Futura and Stash, Kingpin NYC, and a whole host of others. They were not all from one culture or one place. And that was the point. They converged in this space. And that's why I keep coming back to the trade show itself. A convention is a kind of technology. It compresses distance. It turns phone calls, magazines, shops, parties, and scattered scenes into face-to-face legitimate relationships. ASR had already done that for established surf and action sports businesses. 432F did it for a culture that was still figuring out what it was becoming. So does streetwear galvanize at 432F? I think that's a fair estimation. And galvanize, though, we got to remember, is different from begin. So I want to be careful that we say born or began or created. because these things were happening in silos, in people's own spaces all over the country. It was already starting. It was happening in the streets. And 432F gave a lot of those people a room, a space. And that's a lot of times all we needed. That room reflected what everyone was already becoming. Today, streetwear is treated as a global fashion category. Luxury houses. Come on, y'all. Nobody thought Louis Vuitton would be doing what they're doing. Right or wrong, that's an ode to the strength, to the influence, to the creativity of what we call streetwear and the value of it. Corporations want to sell it now. Marketing departments have systems for finding influence and algorithms to tell us who the tastemakers are. We knew, like Paul Middleman knew, that whole Stussy tribe knew, because those were just his peoples, and they were the ones that were actually in the mix moving. Now everything feels so contrived. It was so organic back then, and that's the beauty of it. If we allow things to come to life organically, we'll start to see the original power wasn't that somebody discovered a category to sell. The power is that we all came from different communities. We're already exchanging ideas before we even knew what the category would be worth. And if we can start to see that, that's how we build the future together. Because before streetwear became an industry, it was a mosaic of rebellious cultures, sharing attitudes, music, ideas, and space. To me, conventions gave everybody somewhere to meet and really catapulted our ability to create this industry called streetwear. So 432F didn't create those pieces, but it put a lot of them in the same room. For that moment in San Diego, that's when everybody that was part of that mosaic could finally see themselves and a reflection of who they were in others. And that is the power of our culture. We come together through energy, through creativity, through authenticity. But when it gets taken from our culture and put into a business that goes to scale, somewhere along the line, we lose our way from where we started from. Now we have this understanding. We have 40, 50 plus years of being in business. And the one thing that we're missing right now is ownership on scale. Maybe if we remember where we come from, we can figure out how to go forward together. And remember, y'all, they told us hip hop was a fad. Look at us now. And of course, I'm your host, Hawaii Mike. Make sure y'all tune in, tap in, mash them likes, mash that subscribe. Make sure y'all share this and, you know what I'm saying, get it out to everybody, because we want to tell our story told by the people that were there so they can share their perspective. We'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.